The morning mist hung thick over the Naval Amphibious Base Coronado as Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison stepped out of his quarters. 22 years of military service had taught him to read the subtle signs that marked significant days, and today felt different. The air carried an electric tension that made veteran operators pause in their morning routines. Morrison had been stationed at Coronado for 8 months, long enough to know the rhythms of SEAL team operations. He understood the hierarchies, the unspoken rules, and the complex social dynamics that governed America's most elite fighting force. What he couldn't understand was why every SEAL he encountered showed a peculiar behavior whenever they spotted a particular figure moving through the base. The man appeared to be in his 60s, average height with graying hair that spoke of decades under harsh suns. He wore no uniform, carried no visible identification, and displayed no rank insignia of any kind. Yet without fail, every SEAL who crossed his path would stop, straighten to attention, and render a crisp salute. The mysterious figure would acknowledge each salute with a slight nod before continuing on his way. Morrison first witnessed this phenomenon during his second week at Coronado. He had been walking toward the command building when he noticed Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, a hard-bitten veteran with 16 years of service, suddenly halt mid-stride. Rodriguez's casual demeanor transformed instantly into parade ground precision as he snapped to attention and delivered a textbook salute to an approaching civilian. The civilian was unremarkable in appearance. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin, but nothing about him screamed military legend. His clothing was simple: khaki pants, a plain button-down shirt, and worn leather boots that had seen considerable use. His face bore the weathered lines of someone who had spent significant time outdoors, but his eyes held something deeper. They carried the steady, measuring gaze of a man who had looked death in the face and emerged unchanged. "Who was that?" Morrison had asked Rodriguez after the mysterious figure passed. Rodriguez had looked at him with genuine surprise. "You don't know." When Morrison shook his head, Rodriguez's expression shifted to something approaching reverence. "That was the ghost shooter." The name meant nothing to Morrison, but the weight Rodriguez placed on those words suggested it should. Over the following weeks, Morrison began paying closer attention to the reactions the ghost shooter generated. Master Chief Williams, a man Morrison had never seen show deference to anyone below flag rank, would interrupt meetings to step outside and render proper honors. Lieutenant Commander Davis, who led one of the most successful direct action teams in recent memory, spoke of the ghost shooter in hushed, almost mystical terms. Morrison's curiosity finally got the better of him during a late evening at the base's informal gathering spot, a modest building where operators would decompress after training exercises. The conversation had turned to legendary shots in military history when someone mentioned the ghost shooter's name. The room fell silent, and Morrison seized his opportunity. "I keep hearing about this ghost shooter," Morrison said carefully. "Everyone acts like he's some kind of legend, but no one will tell me who he actually is." The silence stretched uncomfortably until Master Chief Williams spoke. "Some stories aren't ours to tell, Commander, but I'll say this: that man has earned more respect in the SEAL community than anyone else alive." Petty Officer First Class Thompson, a sniper instructor with multiple combat deployments, leaned forward. "You want to understand why we salute him? Look at what happened in Afghanistan in 2004. Operation Silent Thunder." Morrison recognized the operation name from classified briefings. It had been a joint special operations mission that prevented a major terrorist attack against coalition forces. The official reports credited the success to superior intelligence and coordinated teamwork, but the details remained heavily redacted. "The ghost shooter was part of that?" Morrison asked. Thompson exchanged glances with Williams before responding. "He wasn't just part of it, Commander. He was the reason it succeeded." The story that emerged, told in fragments and careful omissions, painted a picture of a sniper operation that defied conventional military doctrine. A single shooter, working alone in hostile territory, had eliminated 17 high-value targets across a 48-hour period. Each shot had been precisely calculated to prevent enemy forces from coordinating an assault that would have overrun a forward operating base housing over 300 coalition personnel. 17 confirmed kills in 2 days, Williams said quietly. Average engagement distance was 800 meters. Longest shot was confirmed at 1,147 meters, in mountain terrain, at night, with environmental conditions that should have made precision shooting impossible. Morrison felt his skepticism rising. Those numbers sound impressive, but nothing, Thompson interrupted. I've seen the after-action reports. I've talked to the spotters who were there. This wasn't luck or exaggeration. This was surgical precision delivered by someone operating at a level the rest of us can only dream about. The conversation continued late into the night, with each veteran adding pieces to a puzzle that grew more remarkable with each detail. The ghost shooter's military record was apparently classified at levels that made even general officers uncomfortable. His real name was known only to a handful of people, and those individuals spoke of him with the kind of reverence usually reserved for Medal of Honor recipients. What made the mystery deeper was the ghost shooter's current status. He held no official position at Coronado, answered to no commanding officer, and appeared to come and go as he pleased. Yet his presence was tolerated, even welcomed, by base leadership who normally maintained strict protocols about civilian access. Morrison learned that the ghost shooter's daily routine was surprisingly mundane. He arrived at the base each morning around 06:30, walked a specific route that took him past the training facilities, and spent several hours observing various exercises. He never interfered with operations or offered unsolicited advice, but instructors would occasionally approach him for quiet consultations. The most telling detail came from Gunnery Sergeant Martinez, a Marine sniper instructor on temporary assignment to Coronado. Martinez had initially been confused by the deference shown to the civilian until he witnessed the ghost shooter's capabilities firsthand. "We were conducting advanced marksmanship training," Martinez explained, "long-range precision shooting in challenging conditions. Our best students were struggling with a particular scenario, multiple targets at varying distances, limited engagement window, environmental factors that made ballistic calculations extremely difficult." Martinez paused, as if still processing what he had witnessed. The ghost shooter had been watching from the observation area. Suddenly, the range officer asked if he'd be willing to demonstrate the proper technique. I figured it was some kind of courtesy gesture. Maybe the old man had been a decent marksman back in his day. What happened next had fundamentally altered Martinez's understanding of what was possible with a precision rifle. The ghost shooter had taken the weapon, made a brief assessment of conditions, and engaged 6 targets in rapid succession. Each shot found its mark with mechanical precision, including 2 targets that the training staff had privately considered impossible hits given the environmental constraints. It wasn't just the accuracy, Martinez continued. It was the process. No hesitation, no second-guessing, no visible stress response. He approached each shot with the kind of calm certainty you only see in people who've performed under life-or-death pressure hundreds of times. The demonstration had lasted less than 3 minutes, but its impact on the watching SEAL trainees was profound. Several students later admitted that witnessing the ghost shooter's performance had fundamentally changed their understanding of what expert marksmanship looked like. Morrison found himself drawn into the mystery, despite his natural skepticism. He began timing his own movements to cross paths with the ghost shooter, hoping to observe him more closely. What he saw was a man who moved through the base with the quiet authority of someone who belonged there completely, even though his presence defied normal military protocols. The ghost shooter's interactions were minimal but meaningful. He would acknowledge greetings with polite nods, occasionally offer brief responses to direct questions, and demonstrate an encyclopedic knowledge of current training methodologies. However, he consistently deflected attempts to discuss his own background or experiences. One morning, Morrison encountered the ghost shooter outside the base's memorial wall, where the names of fallen SEALs were inscribed in black granite. The older man stood in silent contemplation, his weathered hand resting lightly on the stone surface. Morrison approached cautiously, uncertain whether he was intruding on a private moment. "They were good men," the ghost shooter said without turning around. His voice carried the quiet weight of personal loss. Morrison moved closer, studying the names carved into the memorial. Many were familiar from mission briefings and historical accounts. "Did you know them?" The ghost shooter's hand moved to touch a particular name. Petty Officer First Class David Chen, killed in action during Operation Enduring Freedom. "David was one of my students, exceptional sniper, even better human being." The simple statement carried layers of meaning that Morrison was only beginning to understand. The ghost shooter wasn't just a legendary marksman. He had been an instructor, a mentor to the men whose names now adorned the memorial wall. "How many did you train?" Morrison asked. The ghost shooter turned to face him for the first time in their brief acquaintanceship. His eyes held depths that spoke of decades spent preparing young warriors for the ultimate test. "Enough to know that each one carried more potential than they realized. My job was simply to help them discover it." That evening, Morrison approached Master Chief Williams with renewed purpose. "I need to understand who this man really is. The respect he commands isn't just about shooting ability. There's something deeper." Williams studied Morrison carefully before responding. "You're right, Commander. The shooting is just the visible part. The ghost shooter represents something that goes to the core of what we aspire to be as SEALs." The Master Chief paused, choosing his words carefully. "In our community, we measure a man by his actions under pressure, his willingness to put others before himself, and his dedication to the mission above personal recognition. The ghost shooter embodies all of those qualities in ways that have become legendary." Williams went on to explain that the ghost shooter's influence extended far beyond his direct military service. Former students who had trained under him could be found throughout the special operations community, carrying forward techniques and principles that had saved countless lives in combat. "He never sought credit for their successes," Williams noted. "Never claimed ownership of their achievements. But anyone who understands our training methodologies can recognize his influence in how they operate." The picture that emerged was of a man who had dedicated his life to perfecting the art of precision shooting, not for personal glory, but to ensure that others could return home safely from impossible missions. His techniques had been refined through decades of combat experience and then passed on to successive generations of warriors. Morrison began to understand why every SEAL on the base rendered honors to the ghost shooter. It wasn't just respect for his legendary capabilities, it was recognition of a debt that could never be fully repaid. The techniques he had developed, the students he had trained, the innovations he had contributed to special operations methodology had collectively saved thousands of lives. Yet the man himself remained an enigma. His official records were classified beyond Morrison's clearance level. His current role at Coronado was unofficial and undefined. He existed in a unique space between military structure and civilian status, accepted by all but belonging to no particular organization. As Morrison's understanding deepened, so did his respect for the mysterious figure. The ghost shooter represented something increasingly rare in modern warfare, a warrior scholar who had mastered his craft so completely that his very presence elevated those around him. The morning ritual continued, day after day. The ghost shooter would walk his established route, acknowledging the salutes of men who had earned the right to call themselves Navy SEALs. Each gesture of respect was returned with quiet dignity, creating a daily reminder of excellence achieved through dedication rather than rank. Morrison realized he was witnessing something special, a living connection between the SEAL community's present and its legendary past. The ghost shooter served as both inspiration and standard, challenging each operator to pursue their own version of excellence while honoring the traditions that made their brotherhood unique. But questions remained. Who was the ghost shooter before he became a legend? What classified operations had forged his reputation? And why did a man with his capabilities choose to spend his days observing training exercises at Coronado rather than enjoying a well-earned retirement? The answers to those questions lay buried in classified files and the memories of men who understood that some stories were too important to share carelessly. But Morrison sensed that the full truth about the ghost shooter would prove even more remarkable than the legends that surrounded him. Lieutenant Commander Morrison's investigation into the ghost shooter's background led him to Chief Warrant Officer Rebecca Hayes, an intelligence analyst who had served multiple deployments supporting special operations. Hayes possessed the kind of institutional memory that made her invaluable to commanders seeking historical context for current operations. "You're asking about classified material," Hayes warned when Morrison approached her about the ghost shooter. "But there are some stories that have become part of our operational doctrine. Lessons learned that every sniper studies, even if they don't know the source." Hayes explained that the ghost shooter's influence on modern sniper tactics could be traced through a series of revolutionary techniques that had emerged from classified operations in the early 2000s. These innovations had fundamentally changed how precision shooters approached complex urban environments and multi-target scenarios. "Take the Fallujah technique," Hayes continued. "Every sniper school now teaches a specific method for engaging multiple targets in confined urban spaces while minimizing civilian exposure. That technique didn't exist in any manual before 2005. It was developed by one man during a single operation that lasted 72 hours. The operation Hayes referenced was later confirmed through careful conversations with operators who had served during the Second Battle of Fallujah. The ghost shooter had been embedded with a Marine sniper team tasked with eliminating high-value targets who were coordinating insurgent activities from positions scattered throughout the city. Master Sergeant Collins, a Marine sniper instructor, provided additional details during an off-the-record conversation. The situation was impossible by conventional standards. 17 confirmed targets operating from fortified positions across a 4-square-kilometer area. Civilian populations throughout the engagement zone. Rules of engagement that required positive identification and minimal collateral damage. Collins explained that traditional sniper doctrine called for methodical elimination of targets over an extended period, potentially lasting weeks. However, intelligence indicated that the insurgent network was planning a coordinated attack that would occur within days. The ghost shooter had volunteered to attempt rapid elimination of the entire network. He spent 18 hours conducting reconnaissance from multiple observation points, Collins recalled. No sleep, minimal food, constant movement to avoid detection. He mapped every target location, studied civilian movement patterns, and identified engagement windows that lasted sometimes less than 30 seconds. What followed became the subject of classified studies that influenced sniper training for the next 2 decades. Working alone except for a single spotter, the ghost shooter engaged all 17 targets across a 48-hour period. Each shot was calculated to occur during precisely timed moments when civilian exposure was minimized and target identification was absolute. The technical precision required for such an operation challenged fundamental assumptions about what was humanly possible. Engagement distances varied from 300 to nearly 1,500 meters. Environmental conditions included sandstorms, urban heat distortion, and structural obstacles that required indirect firing solutions. Several targets were eliminated through ricochets that demonstrated mathematical precision in calculating bullet trajectory off concrete surfaces. The insurgent leadership never realized they were under systematic attack, Collins noted. Each elimination appeared random, separated by hours or sometimes a full day. By the time they understood what was happening, the network was completely dismantled. The operation's success prevented a planned assault on coalition forces that intelligence estimated would have resulted in hundreds of casualties. More importantly, the techniques developed during those 72 hours became foundational elements of modern urban sniper doctrine. Morrison discovered that similar innovations had emerged from other classified operations throughout the ghost shooter's career. Each mission had produced methodological breakthroughs that were quietly incorporated into training programs without attribution to their source. Petty Officer Jackson, a current sniper instructor, described learning these techniques during his initial training without understanding their origin. "We called it advanced methodology," Jackson explained. "Complex calculations for environmental factors, psychological preparation for extended operations, equipment modifications that nobody else was using." Jackson's own combat experience had validated the effectiveness of these methods during multiple deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq. "Techniques I learned from instructors who apparently learned from the ghost shooter himself. It was like a chain of knowledge that kept getting refined and improved. The ghost shooter's influence extended beyond individual techniques to encompass operational philosophy. Former students spoke of learning to approach impossible missions by breaking them into component challenges that could be methodically solved." Captain Torres, now serving at Naval Special Warfare Command, described the psychological dimension of the ghost shooter's training approach. "He taught us that precision shooting was only 30% technical skill. The other 70% was mental preparation, emotional control, and absolute confidence in your ability to deliver when lives depended on it." Torres recounted a training exercise that had fundamentally changed his understanding of sniper capabilities. Students were presented with a scenario involving multiple hostages held in a building with minimal visibility and extreme time constraints. Conventional training suggested the situation was impossible for a single shooter. The ghost shooter demonstrated a solution that required engaging 4 targets in sequence within a 12-second window, Torres remembered. Each shot had to be precisely timed to prevent any terrorist from realizing the attack was in progress. Miss the timing by even 2 seconds, and hostages would die. The demonstration had required not just exceptional marksmanship, but precise coordination with an assault team, real-time analysis of target behavior patterns, and psychological manipulation of terrorist attention. The ghost shooter had executed the entire sequence flawlessly, creating a training scenario that became a standard test for advanced students. Morrison learned that such demonstrations were common during the ghost shooter's active teaching period. He would regularly present students with scenarios that appeared impossible, then demonstrate solutions that expanded their understanding of what was achievable through proper preparation and technique. Chief Petty Officer Washington, who had trained under the ghost shooter in 2008, described the experience as transformative. "He didn't just teach us to shoot accurately, he taught us to think like weapons systems, to calculate not just ballistics but psychology, timing, environmental factors, and mission requirements simultaneously." Washington's subsequent combat performance had demonstrated the effectiveness of this approach. During a hostage rescue operation in Somalia, he had successfully eliminated 3 targets while suspended from a helicopter in high winds, executing a solution that he traced directly to training principles learned from the ghost shooter. "The situation was impossible by every standard I had been taught previously," Washington explained. "But the ghost shooter's methods had prepared me to find solutions where none seemed to exist. That's the real value of his teaching. He expanded our definition of possible." The psychological impact of the ghost shooter's presence at Coronado became clear through conversations with current trainees. Students who had never interacted with him directly spoke of feeling additional pressure to perform when they knew he was observing their exercises. Seaman Marcus Reed, currently enrolled in sniper training, described the phenomenon. Everyone knows he's watching sometimes. You can't see him, but you know he's there. It makes you want to execute everything perfectly because you're performing for someone who represents the absolute standard of excellence. Instructors confirmed that student performance measurably improved when the ghost shooter was present during training exercises. His silent observation created an atmosphere that pushed trainees to attempt solutions they might otherwise consider beyond their abilities. "It's not intimidation," explained Gunnery Sergeant Peters. "It's inspiration." These students understand they're in the presence of someone who has solved real problems that saved real lives. That knowledge motivates them to reach for their own highest level of performance. Morrison began to understand that the ghost shooter's current role at Coronado served multiple purposes. His presence maintained connection between current training and proven combat effectiveness. His observations allowed him to identify students with exceptional potential who might benefit from advanced mentoring. Most importantly, he served as a living reminder that the techniques being taught had been tested under the ultimate conditions. The respect shown by veteran SEALs became more comprehensible as Morrison learned about specific incidents where the ghost shooter's innovations had directly saved lives. Master Chief Williams eventually shared a personal account that illustrated the practical impact of these techniques. "My team was pinned down in Iraq in 2007, Williams recalled. 3 wounded, no viable extraction route, enemy forces converging from multiple directions. Our sniper support had been eliminated earlier in the engagement." Williams described a desperate situation where conventional tactics had failed and survival seemed unlikely. However, his team's sniper had been trained using the ghost shooter's methodologies for operating in compromised positions. "Petty Officer Mitchell used techniques that I had never seen before," Williams continued. "He engaged 12 targets from a position that should have been impossible to survive. Rapid movement between firing positions, unconventional shooting angles, psychological manipulation of enemy behavior patterns." The engagement lasted 47 minutes and resulted in successful extraction of the entire team. Mitchell's performance had demonstrated capabilities that Williams had previously considered theoretical. After the operation, Mitchell explained that everything he did came from training exercises developed by the ghost shooter. Scenarios that seemed unrealistic during training had prepared him for exactly the situation we encountered. Similar testimonials emerged from operators throughout the special operations community. The ghost shooter's techniques had been refined through real combat experience and then transmitted through training programs that prepared subsequent generations for challenges that had not yet been encountered. Morrison discovered that the ghost shooter's influence extended to equipment development as well. Several innovations in precision shooting platforms could be traced to requirements he had identified during classified operations. Chief Warrant Officer Kim Murphy, an armaments specialist, explained how specific modifications to standard sniper rifles had emerged from after-action reports submitted by the ghost shooter. He would identify equipment limitations during operations and propose engineering solutions that seemed impossible to implement. Murphy described a particular case where the ghost shooter had requested modifications that would allow a standard rifle system to maintain accuracy while firing from unconventional positions. The engineering challenges seemed insurmountable. The barrel harmonics alone should have made his requirements impossible. However, subsequent development produced innovations that became standard features of modern precision shooting platforms. The modifications had not only met the ghost shooter's requirements, but improved overall system performance in ways that benefited all users. He understood the relationship between human performance and equipment capabilities better than most engineers, Murphy noted. His recommendations were always based on real operational requirements rather than theoretical improvements. The practical impact of these innovations became evident during the extensive use of precision shooting platforms in Afghanistan and Iraq. Operators consistently reported that their equipment performed better in challenging conditions than previous generation systems. Morrison realized that the Ghost Shooter's contributions to special operations capability development had created a multiplier effect that extended far beyond his personal combat performance. Every innovation he had driven, every technique he had developed, and every operator he had trained contributed to an overall enhancement of American special operations effectiveness. The mystery surrounding his identity seemed almost secondary to the documented impact of his contributions. Whether his name appeared in official records or not, his influence was embedded in the fundamental capabilities that defined modern special operations. Yet questions remained about the man himself. What drove someone to pursue such extraordinary levels of performance? What personal cost had been paid for achievements that remained largely unknown to the public? And what had brought him to Coronado, where he continued to serve in an unofficial capacity that benefited current and future generations of warriors? The answers to those questions would require understanding not just the Ghost Shooter's professional achievements, but the personal journey that had shaped one of America's most effective warriors into a mentor whose influence would endure long after his active service had ended. The breakthrough in Morrison's investigation came from an unexpected source. Admiral Patricia Hawkins, commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, requested a private meeting that initially seemed unrelated to the Ghost Shooter mystery. However, her opening statement immediately clarified the connection. "Commander Morrison, I understand you've been asking questions about our civilian observer," Admiral Hawkins said. "Before we discuss his current status, I need to provide you with some historical context that will explain why his presence here represents something extraordinary." Admiral Hawkins had served in special operations for 31 years, rising through the ranks during some of the most challenging periods in modern military history. Her perspective on the Ghost Shooter carried the weight of someone who had witnessed his impact across multiple decades. "The man you know as the Ghost Shooter is Chief Master Sergeant Michael Cross, retired. His official service record shows 26 years of active duty spanning Vietnam, Panama, Desert Storm, and the early stages of Operations Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom." The name meant nothing to Morrison initially, but Admiral Hawkins' reverent tone suggested its significance. She continued with details that began to illuminate the extraordinary career hidden behind the modest civilian facade. Master Sergeant Cross holds the unofficial record for confirmed kills by any American sniper, 237 confirmed eliminations across 6 decades of service. More importantly, he revolutionized precision shooting doctrine for every branch of the military. Admiral Hawkins explained that Cross had begun his military career as an 18-year-old Marine volunteer during the final stages of the Vietnam conflict. His natural aptitude for marksmanship had quickly elevated him to specialist status, but his real contributions emerged during subsequent decades as warfare evolved to emphasize precision over mass firepower. Cross recognized earlier than anyone else that modern conflicts would require shooters capable of surgical precision in urban environments, the Admiral noted. While other specialists focused on long-range capability, Cross developed techniques for complex scenarios involving multiple targets, civilian populations, and rapidly changing tactical situations. Morrison learned that Cross's transition from individual performer to institutional innovator had occurred during his assignment to the newly formed Special Operations Command in the 1980s. His role involved developing training programs that could produce precision shooters capable of supporting unconventional warfare operations. "He spent 8 years creating doctrine that didn't exist previously," Admiral Hawkins continued. "Everything from psychological preparation techniques to equipment modifications to mathematical models for calculating shots in extreme conditions. His work became the foundation for every advanced marksmanship program in the military. The Admiral produced a classified file that detailed Cross's contributions to Special Operations capability development. Morrison was astonished to discover that techniques he had learned during his own training could be traced directly to innovations developed by Cross decades earlier. Operation Silent Thunder in 2004 was actually his final active mission, Admiral Hawkins revealed. At age 58, he volunteered for an assignment that younger operators had deemed impossible. His success prevented a coordinated terrorist attack that would have killed hundreds of coalition personnel. Morrison remembered the operation from previous briefings, but now understood why the after-action reports had seemed almost fictional in their descriptions of individual performance. Cross had accomplished something that challenged fundamental assumptions about human capability under stress. After Silent Thunder, Cross officially retired from active duty, the Admiral continued. However, his expertise was too valuable to lose entirely. We created an informal consultant role that allowed him to continue contributing to training and doctrine development. The arrangement explained Cross's unique status at Coronado. He possessed no official authority, but commanded respect that transcended normal military hierarchy. His presence was tolerated by base leadership because his contributions continued to enhance the effectiveness of America's most elite warriors. Admiral Hawkins arranged for Morrison to access additional classified files that revealed the full scope of Cross's career. The documents painted a picture of sustained excellence that spanned technological and tactical evolution across 6 decades. Cross had adapted his techniques from bolt-action rifles in Vietnam to advanced precision platforms in Iraq and Afghanistan. He had transitioned from supporting conventional infantry operations to enabling the most sensitive special operations missions. Throughout these changes, he had consistently pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible for individual shooters. His students are serving throughout the special operations community, Admiral Hawkins noted. Many have become instructors themselves, passing on techniques that originated with Cross. His influence extends far beyond anyone he trained directly. Morrison discovered that Cross's teaching methodology was as revolutionary as his shooting techniques. Rather than focusing solely on mechanical skills, he emphasized the mental preparation required to perform under ultimate pressure. Sergeant Major Williams, who had trained under Cross in 1998, provided insight into his instructional approach. He didn't just teach us to hit targets. He taught us to think systematically about impossible problems and find solutions that others wouldn't even attempt. Williams described a training philosophy that combined technical precision with psychological resilience. Students learned to approach each mission as a complex problem requiring innovative solutions rather than routine application of standard techniques. Cross would present scenarios that seemed impossible by conventional standards, Williams recalled. Then he would demonstrate that the impossible became achievable through proper analysis, preparation, and execution. He expanded our understanding of what we could accomplish. The psychological dimension of Cross's teaching proved as important as the technical elements. He helped students develop the mental framework required to operate effectively in situations where failure meant death for themselves or others. Morrison learned that Cross's retirement had not ended his contributions to special operations effectiveness. He continued developing new techniques, mentoring promising students, and providing consultation on missions that required extraordinary precision. Chief Warrant Officer Davis, current head of sniper training at Coronado, explained how Cross's ongoing involvement enhanced their programs. He observes our training exercises and occasionally suggests improvements that we would never have considered. His perspective comes from actual combat experience that spans 6 decades. Davis described instances where Cross had identified subtle flaws in training scenarios that could have produced negative outcomes during real operations. His recommendations consistently improved both the realism and effectiveness of preparation exercises. He doesn't interfere with our instruction, Davis emphasized. But when he makes a suggestion, we listen carefully. His track record of being right about these things is remarkable. Morrison discovered that Cross's daily routine at Coronado served multiple purposes beyond casual observation. He was conducting ongoing assessment of current capabilities and identifying areas where doctrine might require updates based on evolving threat environments. The nature of precision shooting continues to change, Admiral Hawkins explained. New technology, different operational requirements, evolving enemy tactics, all of these factors require continuous adaptation of our training methods. Cross's unique perspective allowed him to identify trends that might not be apparent to instructors focused on current requirements. His recommendations helped ensure that training programs remained ahead of operational challenges rather than simply responding to them. Morrison also learned about Cross's personal sacrifices during his extraordinary career. 3 marriages had ended due to the demands of classified assignments that kept him deployed for extended periods. His children had grown up largely without their father's presence during their formative years. He paid a personal price for his dedication to the mission, Admiral Hawkins acknowledged. Like many operators of his generation, Cross chose military service over personal considerations. His family relationships never recovered from those early decisions. The loneliness of Cross's current situation became apparent through conversations with personnel who interacted with him regularly. He lived in modest quarters near the base, maintaining minimal personal connections while continuing to serve in his unofficial capacity. Chief Rodriguez, who had known Cross for 12 years, described him as a man who had found purpose in mentoring others but struggled with the isolation that came from his unique position. He's surrounded by people who respect him. But genuine friendships are difficult when your entire life has been classified. Morrison began to understand that Cross's presence at Coronado represented both honor and burden. The respect shown by every SEAL acknowledged his contributions, but it also reinforced his separation from normal social interaction. The daily salutes that had initially puzzled Morrison now carried deeper meaning. They were expressions of gratitude for sacrifices that extended far beyond battlefield performance. Cross had given his entire adult life to developing capabilities that protected others, often at significant personal cost. Morrison's final conversation with Cross occurred during a chance encounter at the base memorial wall. The older man was again standing silently before the names of fallen warriors, many of whom had been his students. "Commander Morrison," Cross said without turning around, "I hear you've been asking questions about my background." Morrison was initially startled that Cross knew about his investigation, but quickly realized that someone with his experience would naturally be aware of such inquiries. "I was curious about why everyone shows you such respect," Morrison admitted. Cross smiled slightly. "Respect isn't something you can demand or purchase. It has to be earned through actions over time. These men salute me because they understand what we've accomplished together." For the first time, Cross spoke directly about his career and philosophy. "I spent 40 years learning to solve impossible problems with precision weapons. But the real satisfaction came from teaching others to exceed my own capabilities." Cross explained that his current role at Coronado represented the culmination of his life's work. Rather than simply enjoying retirement, he continued contributing to the development of warriors who would face challenges he could not imagine. "Every generation of operators faces different threats," Cross noted. "My job is to help them develop the mental tools they'll need to create solutions for problems that don't exist yet." Morrison realized that Cross's presence at Coronado served as both inspiration and standard for current and future SEALs. His life represented complete dedication to military excellence, regardless of personal cost or public recognition. The salutes rendered to Cross each day were acknowledgments of a debt that could never be fully repaid. His innovations had saved thousands of lives. His students had become legends in their own right. His dedication had elevated the entire special operations community, yet Cross himself seemed motivated primarily by the opportunity to continue serving, even in an unofficial capacity. He had found meaning in a life dedicated to protecting others through the development of extraordinary capabilities. As Morrison watched Cross standing before the memorial wall, he understood that he was witnessing something rare and valuable. Here was a man who had achieved legendary status through consistent excellence over decades, yet remained focused on contributing to future success rather than celebrating past achievements. The ghost shooter's true identity was Chief Master Sergeant Michael Cross, but his real significance transcended rank or recognition. He represented the ideal of selfless service, technical mastery, and absolute dedication to mission accomplishment. Every SEAL who rendered honors to Cross was acknowledging not just his individual achievements, but the standard of excellence he represented. In a community defined by extraordinary performance, Cross had established himself as the measure against which all others would be judged. His legacy would endure long after his presence at Coronado ended. The techniques he developed, the students he mentored, and the standards he established had become permanent fixtures of American special operations capability. Morrison left their conversation with profound respect for the man known as the ghost shooter. Behind the modest civilian facade was a warrior whose contributions had fundamentally enhanced America's ability to protect its interests through precise application of overwhelming skill. The mystery was solved, but the legend would continue. Chief Master Sergeant Michael Cross had earned his place in the pantheon of military excellence through 6 decades of unwavering dedication to perfection in the service of others.